I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. I'd planned this trip for weeks, read up on everything, packed the right gear, mapped out my route. I wasn't some idiot who just wandered into the woods with nothing but a flashlight and a prayer. I was prepared. At least I thought I was. The plan was simple: hike into the national forest, camp for a few days, and clear my head. No phone service, no people, just me and the trees. I'd done solo trips before, but never this deep, never this isolated. Maybe that's why I did it. I wanted the challenge. The first day was fine. I parked my truck at a small trailhead, locked everything up, and set off with my pack. The forest was beautiful, tall, dense pines stretching in every direction. The air crisp, the smell of earth and damp leaves filling my lungs. I followed a marked trail for the first few miles, then veered off onto a smaller path, one that wasn't as maintained but still visible enough to follow. I made camp near a small creek, set up my tent, gathered some wood, and ate a quick meal. As the sun dipped below the trees, the temperature dropped, and the forest went quiet. That deep, heavy silence that only happens when you're far from civilization. I slept lightly, waking up at every little sound. Twigs snapping, the rustle of leaves, the wind shifting through the branches. Normal forest noises, but when you're alone, every sound feels like something watching you. Morning came and I felt stupid for being so on edge. I packed up, moved deeper into the forest, and spent the day hiking. The plan was to make a wide loop and end up back at my truck in 3 days. But by the second night, things started feeling off. It was small things at first. The uneasy feeling that I wasn't alone. A faint smell of smoke in the air, like a campfire, but distant. Too distant. I never actually saw any sign of people, no footprints, no litter, nothing. Just that smell lingering before fading away. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a fire from miles away, carried by the wind. But then I started seeing things. Little things. A piece of fabric caught on a branch. A pile of sticks arranged in a way that didn't feel natural. And then, something that made my stomach drop. A footprint. Not mine. Fresh. I stopped, staring at it. The forest was dense, untouched. I hadn't seen a single soul since leaving the main trail. But someone had been here. Recently. I told myself it was fine. Maybe just another hiker. Maybe a hunter. But something about it didn't sit right. I pushed on, trying to ignore the growing unease in my chest. By the time I made camp, the feeling hadn't gone away. It had gotten worse. That night, I barely slept. Every time I started to drift off, something pulled me back. A sound, a movement, a feeling. My body refused to relax. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I must have dozed off. But I woke up suddenly, heart pounding. Something was outside my tent. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The sound was subtle, soft crunching, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate, close. I reached for my knife, gripping it tight, my mind racing. Could be an animal. A deer, maybe. A bear. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The footsteps stopped. The air felt heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I waited, my pulse hammering in my ears. Minutes passed, maybe more. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the feeling lifted. The presence, whatever it was gone. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in my tent, knife in hand, waiting for morning. The first light, I packed up and started moving, fast. My original plan was to stay another night, but I didn't care anymore. I wanted out. I moved quickly, retracing my route, heart pounding with every step. But something was wrong. The landscape felt different. The trees looked unfamiliar. The trail I'd made wasn't there. I stopped, trying to calm down. I had a compass, I had a map, I could figure this out. But the more I looked around, the more I realized I didn't know where I was. I'd gotten turned around somehow. I wasn't going back the way I came. I was deeper in. Panic crept in, but I pushed it down. I just needed to find a landmark, something familiar. I walked for hours. The sun moved overhead, then started sinking again. And then, just when I thought I was making progress, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My own campsite, the fire pit, the disturbed ground where my tent had been. I had been walking in circles. That's when I knew I wasn't getting out before dark. Night came fast, too fast. I was forced to set up camp again, but this time I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to a tree, knife in hand, waiting. The sounds started again, closer this time. Footsteps, slow and careful, circling, watching. I stayed like that until dawn. The next morning I ran. I didn't care about my route anymore. I just moved. I followed the sun, forcing myself in one direction, praying I'd hit a road, a river, anything. Then I saw it, a cabin. It was old, abandoned. The roof sagged, the wood gray with age. But something was off. The door was open. I stepped inside, my breath shallow. Dust covered everything, cobwebs in the corners. But the air smelled wrong, like sweat, like something had been living here. And then I saw it, a backpack, not mine, someone else's, recently used. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't the only one out here, and whoever else was, they weren't lost. They were waiting. I didn't stay. I turned and ran. I don't remember how long I ran, but eventually, the trees thinned, and I stumbled onto a dirt road. My truck was miles away, but I didn't care. I followed the road until I found a ranger station. They asked me what happened. I told them I got lost. I didn't tell them about the footprints, the sounds, the feeling of being watched. They found my campsite later, but they didn't find the cabin. They said there was nothing out there. I know what I saw, and I'm never going back. I don't go into the deep woods anymore. Not alone. Not after what happened. I used to love hiking in the most remote places I could find. The more isolated, the better. I didn't want easy trails or crowded campsites. I wanted real wilderness. The kind where you could walk for miles without seeing another person. Where the silence felt thick. Where the only sounds came from the wind through the trees and the crunch of your own footsteps. That's how I ended up in the backcountry of northern Montana. It was late September, right at the edge of fall. The leaves were turning, the air was crisp, and the days were shorter than I liked. I had planned a 5-day solo trip deep into an area of forest I had never been before. It was miles from any marked trails, way off the beaten path. I had spent weeks planning it, mapping out my route, packing just enough food and gear to last, making sure I had everything I needed. I had done solo trips before. This wasn't new to me, but this one didn't go the way I planned. The first day was perfect. I parked my truck on an old logging road, shouldered my pack, and started hiking. The forest was thick, mostly pine and aspen, the ground soft with fallen leaves. There was no real trail, just game trails here and there, barely visible paths winding through the undergrowth. That was fine. I had my GPS and a good sense of direction. By late afternoon, I found a good spot to set up camp. A small clearing near a slow-moving creek. I pitched my tent, built a fire, ate a simple meal, and sat there as the sun set, listening to the woods settle in for the night. It was quiet, peaceful. I slept hard that night, buried in my sleeping bag against the cold. The second day, I went deeper. I broke camp early, following the creek upstream. The forest grew denser, the trees pressing closer together. There were no signs that anyone had been here in a long time. No footprints, no old campsites, no trash. That's what I wanted. By noon, I reached a ridge that overlooked a deep valley, a sea of trees stretching for miles. It was beautiful. I climbed down into the valley, weaving through thick undergrowth, crossing fallen logs, stepping carefully over hidden roots. The deeper I went, the darker it felt. Even though it was midday, the trees were so thick that only slivers of sunlight reached the forest floor. I found another good campsite near the base of the valley, next to a small, still pond. It was almost too quiet down there. No wind, no bird calls, just stillness. I told myself it was just the way sound carried in the valley. That night, I made a fire, cooked a quick meal, and sat staring into the flames. The silence felt heavier than before, like something pressing down on my ears. I didn't like it, but I was deep in the woods, alone. That's what I had wanted. I crawled into my tent and fell asleep. The third day is when I started feeling uneasy. I woke up early, but the air felt wrong. Thick, stale. The silence from the night before hadn't lifted. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. I shook it off and kept moving. I had planned to hike another few miles, deeper into the valley, but the farther I went, the more I felt watched. Not like a paranoid feeling, something real. I stopped more often, listening. Every time I did, I heard nothing. No movement, no animals. That's what bothered me the most. No birds, no squirrels, not even insects, just my own footsteps. I kept going, but the feeling got worse. The trees were thicker here, the undergrowth dense. It felt like the kind of place no one had been in a long time. Then I found something strange. A tree. At first, it just looked like any other tree, tall, thick, covered in moss. But as I got closer, I saw something carved into the bark. Deep, jagged cuts. Not words, not symbols, just long, deep slashes, like something had scraped against it over and over. I touched the bark. The cuts were fresh. Something had been here, recently. I looked around, suddenly feeling exposed. The trees pressed in too close. The silence sat heavy. I turned around and started back the way I came. That night, I camped in a different spot. A small clearing on higher ground, far from that tree. I built a fire bigger than before. I barely slept. The fourth day, I decided to head back early. I told myself it was just nerves, but I knew better. Something felt off in those woods, and I wasn't going to ignore it. I packed up quickly, checked my map, and started hiking. I planned to follow the creek back to where I had started. But after a few hours, I realized something was wrong. The landscape wasn't right. The trees looked different. The ground felt unfamiliar. I stopped, pulled out my GPS. The signal was weak. That didn't make sense. I was in a valley, but I had never lost signal before. I checked my compass. The needle spun. I stared at it, my stomach sinking. That wasn't possible. I wasn't lost. Couldn't be lost. I had been following the creek. But when I looked around, the creek was gone. I had been walking upstream all morning. I should have been following the water, but the ground was dry. No sign of running water anywhere. I turned around, trying to retrace my steps. Nothing looked familiar. I walked faster. My breath came quicker. I wasn't panicking. Not yet, but I was close. Then I saw it. The tree. The same tree with the deep slashes. I had walked in a circle. I stood there, staring at it, feeling something cold crawl up my spine. That wasn't possible. I had been walking straight. I had checked my map, my GPS. I shouldn't have ended up here again. I turned and walked faster, then jogged, then ran. I didn't stop until I found the creek again. It was almost dark by then. I had wasted the whole day walking in circles. I set up camp right there next to the water. I didn't bother with a fire. I sat in my tent, gripping my knife, listening to the woods. The silence was worse than ever. I barely slept. The fifth day, I woke up to footprints outside my tent. Not boot prints, bare feet, large, deep, leading from the trees to my tent, and then back into the woods. I didn't think. I just moved. I packed up fast, barely stopping to zip my bag. I started walking, fast. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. The whole time I felt it, that weight, that presence. Something watching, something following. I didn't look back. It took me the whole day, but I made it back to my truck. I threw my pack in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled onto the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Between the trees, something moved. A shape, tall, too tall, standing still, watching. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe. I just drove. I don't go into the deep woods anymore. Not alone. Never again. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to hike alone. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was stubbornness. Probably both. I had done a few solo hikes before, But this time I wanted to go deeper. No trails, no signs, just me and the forest. I planned everything, packed enough food for a couple of days, a sturdy tent, a map, a compass, and a satellite phone just in case. I told my brother where I'd be, gave him a rough idea of my route, and promised to check in when I got back. The first day was perfect. I walked for hours, feeling that deep silence only the forest can give you. No traffic, no voices, just the wind and the crunch of my boots on the ground. The trees stretched high above, thick and endless. I saw deer, heard birds, even spotted a fox watching me from the brush. By late afternoon, I found a good spot near a small stream and set up camp. Cooked some food, watched the fire crackle, and lay on my back staring at the sky. The stars were so bright out here, away from the city lights. I felt good, alive. Then night came. I've camped plenty of times before, but this felt different. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just stillness. It felt wrong, but I told myself I was just imagining things. I went into my tent, zipped myself in, and listened. Around midnight, I heard something. Not an animal, something bigger. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. They stopped just outside my tent. My heart pounded. I didn't breathe. Then nothing. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the dark, but eventually, exhaustion took over and I drifted off. Morning came and everything seemed normal. Maybe I had dreamed it. I packed up and hiked deeper, determined not to let my nerves get the best of me. By midday, I was miles from where I started. No trails, no signs of people, just the endless trees. I should have turned back then. That afternoon, I found something that made my stomach turn. A campsite, or what was left of one. A small clearing with an old, rotting tent, collapsed and torn open. The fire pit was nothing but scattered ashes. Rusted cans and gear lay around, untouched for years. I stepped closer. My boot hit something soft, a backpack covered in moss. I nudged it with my foot. It was still zipped. I don't know why I opened it. Inside were clothes, a flashlight, a knife, and a wallet. The ID inside was faded but readable. A guy named Daniel Hayes. I checked the date. He'd gone missing 6 years ago. I stared at the ID, my mind racing. Had he gotten lost? Attacked by an animal? The place felt abandoned, but there were no signs of a struggle. No bones, no blood, just emptiness. I didn't touch anything else. I put the wallet back, zipped up the bag, and stepped away. My gut told me to leave. I turned and froze. There were footprints in the dirt. Fresh ones, not mine. They led from the trees to the abandoned tent. I felt sick. Someone had been here, recently, and they were watching. I grabbed my pack and started moving fast. My heart pounded as I pushed through the brush, heading back the way I came. I wasn't stopping until I was out. But after an hour, I realized something was wrong. I should have hit the stream by now, or the clearing, or something familiar, but the trees all looked the same. I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, useless. I was lost. I took a deep breath, trying to think. The sun was setting. I needed to find shelter. I spotted a rocky overhang ahead and made my way toward it. That's when I smelled it. Rot. A deep, stomach-turning stench, like something dead and wet. I stopped cold. The smell was coming from under the rocks. I inched closer, heart hammering. There, half buried in the dirt, was a boot. I swallowed hard. My fingers shook as I reached out and brushed the dirt away. My breath caught in my throat. A leg, rotting, half-eaten, bones peeking through torn flesh. Whoever it was, they had been here for a long time. I stumbled back, choking down bile. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. Then, a branch snapped behind me. I whipped around. The trees loomed, dark and endless. My chest was tight. Someone was out there, watching. I bolted. I ran blindly, tearing through the brush. Branches whipped my face. Thorns clawed my legs, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs nearly gave out, until I saw it. A road. I don't remember how I got there. One moment I was lost. The next, I was stumbling onto cracked asphalt, gasping for breath. A truck came around the bend. I staggered into the road, waving my arms like a madman. The driver slammed the brakes, cursing as he jumped out. I couldn't even speak. I just pointed back at the trees, at the place I would never return to. The cops went in the next day. They found the old tent, the abandoned gear, but the boot, the leg, gone. They searched for weeks. No other bodies, no footprints, nothing. Daniel Hayes was never found. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the fire, listening to the woods breathe around me. I'd thought this trip would clear my head, but now all I could think about was how wrong everything felt. The silence wasn't normal. It pressed in on me, thick and heavy, like the trees themselves were waiting for something. I'd hiked deep into the forest, farther than I'd ever gone before. I wanted to be alone. I didn't want to see a single person for days, maybe even a week. The news had been too much. I had to get away. Out here, it was supposed to be just me and the trees, the sky, and the ground beneath my boots. The first day was fine. I set up camp, cooked over the fire, and watched the sun slip behind the trees. The quiet was peaceful then. I had a good tent, enough food, and I knew how to survive out here. I wasn't worried. The second day, I noticed things felt different. I'd woken up late, which was strange because I never slept in while camping. The woods always woke me up early, the light filtering through the trees, the birds calling out. But that morning, there was nothing. No birds, no wind, just dead air. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just tired. I packed my gear and decided to explore. I didn't follow a trail. I liked it better that way. I walked for hours, taking in the thick trees, the damp earth beneath my boots, the smell of pine and wet leaves. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then I found the rope. It was tied to a tree, stretched taut, leading off into the woods. Old, frayed, covered in moss. Someone had put it there a long time ago. Maybe a hunter, maybe a trapper, but it didn't look like it had been used in years. I followed it. It led me deeper, twisting between trees, up a small hill. I kept walking, not really sure why. It just felt like I had to. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. It was like the trees were swallowing the sound, like they didn't want me to hear what was up ahead. Then I saw the clearing. There was a cabin. No, not a cabin, something older, rougher. Just 4 walls and a roof, the wood blackened with age. The door was cracked open. The rope I'd been following was tied to a post outside, then disappeared inside the dark doorway. I should have turned around, but I didn't. I stepped forward, my boot crunching on the ground. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of rot and dirt. The floor was covered in leaves, bones, small ones like from birds or rabbits. In the center of the cabin was a table, and on the table was a knife. It was old, rusted, but the blade was still sharp. Next to it, there were deep grooves in the wood, like someone had been cutting into it over and over. I backed up. That's when I saw the ropes on the walls. Dozens of them, tied into loops, hanging like they were waiting for something. I turned and left, fast. I don't know why, but I ran. Something about that place felt wrong, really wrong. The way the ropes hung, the way the table looked like it had been used for something more than just cutting meat. I didn't stop running until I was back at my camp. I threw more wood on the fire, sat down, and tried to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. I told myself it was just an old cabin, someone's hunting shack from years ago, maybe a trapper's place, maybe a poacher's, but I didn't believe it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing things, branches snapping, leaves rustling. The fire burned low, and I felt like the darkness was pressing in on me, like something was out there, just beyond the trees, watching. I didn't see anything, not that night, but the next morning my rope was gone, the one I'd used to tie up my food, to keep it away from animals. It was just gone, not cut, not chewed through, just missing. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I'd tied it wrong. Maybe an animal had dragged it off. But then I saw the footprints. Not mine, bare feet, leading from the edge of my camp, stopping right next to where I had been sleeping, and then walking away into the woods. I packed my gear faster than I ever had before. I didn't eat. I didn't rest. I just left. I hiked all day, barely stopping for water. My legs ached. My pack felt heavier with every step. But I didn't stop. And then, the cabin. I was standing right in front of it again. I had walked in a circle. I never do that. I know how to navigate. I know how to follow a straight path. I shouldn't have ended up back there, but I did. And this time, the door was wide open. I didn't go inside. I turned and walked, no, ran. I didn't care if I was loud. I didn't care if I tripped. I just ran. I don't know how long it took, but I finally found a trail, a real one. And when I saw a group of hikers in the distance, I almost collapsed from relief. I didn't say anything to them. I just nodded, walked past, and didn't stop until I was back at my truck. When I got home, I looked at my map, at my route. I had gone straight, no circles, no turns, but somehow I had ended up back there. I don't know what I found in those woods. I don't want to know, and I sure as hell am never going back. I don't know what made me go so deep. I'd been hiking for years, ever since I was a kid. I knew how to handle myself in the woods. I wasn't reckless. I always packed smart, knew how to read a map, knew how to find my way out if I needed to. But this time, I pushed too far. I told myself I was just looking for a challenge. A new place, untouched, something different from the usual trails I knew too well. That was the whole reason I'd picked this spot. Miles from any real trail, deep in a stretch of forest where the trees ran thick and old, where the land folded into itself in steep ravines and rocky outcrops. I was alone. I wanted to be alone. And then I wasn't. The first day felt normal. I parked my truck off a dirt road, packed my gear, and started walking. It was late summer, hot but not unbearable. The kind of heat that clung to your skin but didn't quite slow you down. I moved fast at first, cutting through thick underbrush, stepping over fallen trees, weaving between trunks so wide they looked prehistoric. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. That's something I always noticed when I hiked far from people, how the sounds changed. Birds, insects, the wind in the leaves. But here, they faded sooner than they should have. I felt it before I really noticed it. That creeping, slow kind of quiet. It wasn't total silence, not yet, but it felt wrong. Like the forest was holding its breath. Still, I ignored it. I had my gear, I had my knife, I had my GPS. No reason to worry. By late afternoon, I found a good place to set up camp. A flat spot near a small stream, surrounded by thick trees that would block the wind. I built a fire, cooked some food, and sat back against my pack, watching the flames. The quiet stayed with me. No birds, no rustling in the underbrush, just the crackle of my fire. I told myself it was nothing. I woke up feeling off. Not sick, not tired, just off, like I'd slept too deep or not enough. The fire had burned down to coals. My tent was still zipped up. Nothing had disturbed my gear, but something in me felt uneasy. I shook it off. I packed a small bag and left my main camp behind. I wanted to explore. That was the whole point of this trip, to see something new, something untouched. I moved fast, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, watching the ground as much as the trees. The land rolled into deep dips and sharp rises, covered in thick moss and old leaves. It felt ancient out here, untouched in a way that was almost unsettling. A few hours in, I found something strange. A rope. It stretched between two trees, old and frayed, covered in moss. Someone had put it there a long time ago. I followed it. It led me deeper, winding through the trees, up a steep hill. At the top, I found a cabin. Not a real cabin, more like the shell of one. The walls sagged, the roof had holes, and the door hung open. I stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rot. The floor was covered in old leaves, animal bones, dirt. In the center of the room, there was a table. On it, a knife, old, rusted, blade still sharp. Next to it, deep grooves cut into the wood, like someone had been hacking at it over and over. I backed up. Something about this place felt wrong. I turned and left, moving faster now. The quiet pressed in harder, heavier, like the trees were watching, like the whole forest was waiting. By the time I made it back to my camp, I felt exhausted. I didn't even eat, just threw more wood on the fire and sat with my back to a tree, watching the dark. That's when I heard it, a branch snapping, not far, not close, just out of sight. I gripped my knife, stayed still. Nothing came. After a long time, I crawled into my tent, knife close to my hand, and forced myself to sleep. I woke up to footprints, not mine. They circled my camp. Bare feet. They stopped right next to where I'd been sleeping, then walked away. I packed my gear fast. I didn't eat, didn't stop. I just wanted out. I didn't care how long it took. I moved fast. I checked my GPS every few minutes, making sure I was headed toward my truck. But after hours of walking, I saw it. The cabin. Again. I never walk in circles. I know how to navigate. I know how to follow a straight line. But I had ended up right back where I started. The door was open wider now. I didn't go inside. I turned and walked, no, ran. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. Through trees, over rocks, not stopping, not caring if I tripped or got cut up. I just ran. I don't know how long it took, but I finally found the dirt road. I almost collapsed when I saw my truck. I didn't look back. I got in, started the engine, and drove. For miles, I felt like something was still behind me. Even now, back home, safe, I still feel it. I keep thinking about the footprints, the way they stopped right next to my tent, and the way they walked away, not toward the woods, toward me. I should have never gone that deep. It wasn't the first time I'd hunted alone. I'd done it since I was a teenager, back when my dad first took me into the woods and taught me how to track, how to read the land, how to disappear into the trees. I liked the solitude. I liked being away from people, from noise, from the world. So when I planned this hunting trip, I didn't think twice about going alone. I drove out to the edge of state land, parked my truck on an old logging road, and hiked in about 10 miles. It was the kind of place where no one just stumbled through by accident. The terrain was too rough, the trees too thick, the land too unforgiving. That's exactly why I picked it. I wanted to be alone. The first day went like any other trip. I set up camp near a small creek, built a fire, and spent the last hours of daylight scouting for signs of deer. There were tracks, fresh ones. Good sign. I figured I'd set up near a game trail the next morning and wait. But that night, something felt off. I don't scare easy, but the woods didn't feel right. It was too quiet. Normally, I'd hear owls, small animals moving through the underbrush, the distant yipping of coyotes. But there was nothing, just dead, heavy silence. I told myself it was fine. Maybe the air pressure had changed. Maybe the animals were just somewhere else. But my gut told me something different. Still, I forced myself to sleep. I woke up before sunrise, packed a small bag, and headed out toward the game trail. It was cold, colder than it should have been for that time of year. My breath came out in white clouds, and the leaves crunched loud under my boots. As I moved, I started noticing little things that made my skin crawl. The first was the footprints. Not deer, not coyote, human, bare feet. They weren't old either. The edges were sharp, the dirt still damp. Someone had walked through here last night. I stopped, listened. Nothing. I wasn't the only one out here. That shouldn't have been a big deal. Sometimes other hunters came through, even this deep. But who the hell hikes 10 miles into the woods barefoot? I kept moving. About an hour later, I found something else. A rope tied between two trees. Old, frayed, sagging. It stretched about chest high like a crude barrier or a marker. Someone had put it there a long time ago. I stepped over it and kept going. Not long after, I saw the tree stand. It was old, the wood gray and cracked, the nails rusting. But someone had been up there recently. There were boot prints on the ladder, the kind left by mud drying in the sun. Whoever they were, they weren't barefoot all the time. I scanned the woods, looking for movement, but saw nothing. Still, I felt watched. That deep, instinctive feeling that pricks at the back of your skull, the kind that tells you you're being followed. I didn't like it. By noon, I gave up on hunting for the day. The feeling wouldn't leave me, and I knew I wouldn't be able to sit still in one place, waiting for a deer, when my nerves were crawling like that. I hiked back toward camp, moving fast. But when I got there, I stopped cold. My tent was open, not torn, not collapsed, just unzipped. I knew for a fact I had zipped it up before I left. I stepped closer, one hand on my knife. The fire pit was still there, my gear untouched. But inside the tent, my sleeping bag was gone. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees, listening. Nothing. I should have left right then. I should have packed up and hiked straight back to the truck. But I didn't. I told myself it was just some lost hiker, maybe some weirdo messing with me. I was wrong. I forced myself to stay. I built up the fire, sat with my back to a tree, and kept my rifle close. I didn't sleep. The night was long, cold, and wrong. The woods felt like they were holding something just beyond the firelight. Then, deep in the night, I heard it. A single footstep, not an animal, too heavy, too careful. Then another, and another, coming closer. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The fire had burned low, just embers now, casting long shadows. Then I saw it, just at the edge of the light. A figure, standing still, watching me. I gripped my rifle tight, heart hammering. I could barely make them out, just a shape in the dark. Then they moved, not toward me, around me, circling, slow, deliberate. I raised my rifle, flicked off the safety. "Keep walking," I whispered. They stopped. Then, just as slow as they had come, they backed away, step by step, gone. I didn't move until the sun came up. The first light, I packed up, fast. I barely ate, just shoved everything into my bag and started walking. I kept my rifle loaded, safety off. Every few steps, I checked behind me. The woods felt wrong. Then, a mile from my camp, I saw it. A structure, not a cabin, not a shack, just 4 wooden posts, a roof made of branches. Inside it, a pile of sleeping bags, at least a dozen, old, dirty, weather-worn, and on top, mine. I turned and walked, fast. I didn't run. Running triggers predators. I just moved, rifle in hand, breath steady, every instinct in me screaming to get out. I hiked for hours, not stopping. When I finally reached my truck, I didn't even put my gear away. I just threw it in, started the engine, and peeled out onto the dirt road. I didn't slow down until I hit pavement. I never went back. I don't know who they were. I don't know what they wanted. But I know one thing. I wasn't the first person they watched in those woods. And I won't be the last.